Hey guys, it's the Disco Spider, and there hasn't been much cartoons based on Mexican culture. Heck, there isn't much cartoons based on any other culture besides the American one. I'm half Filipino, and we've only gotten one Filipino cartoon, and that's a show that no one should ever be proud of, even the ones that have made memes on it. But in 2002, Cartoon Network released probably the first Mexican-inspired cartoon, Mucha Lucha, which is an American-Canadian-Mexican cartoon. Strange. It lasted till 2005 and was sadly cancelled. Then, Nickelodeon decided to produce their own Mexican-inspired cartoon 2 years after Cartoon Network's was cancelled, which leads us to El Tigre, a Nicktoon that was created by a husband and wife, Jorge Gutierrez and Sandra Ecuja. I don't know how to pronounce it, but here's the name. Who also were the directors of the 2014 film Book of Life, which was also Mexican influence. However, this cartoon came around the dark times of cartoons, the 2005 to 2009 years, where there were some good cartoons that aired around those times, like Camp Lazlo, Avatar The Last Airbender, Dave the Barbarian, and a few others, but for the most part, cartoons were becoming a little too dry for my taste. So does El Tigre still hold up 9 years later? We shall see. So, the premise of the show is that it's about a boy named Manny Rivera who has a belt that'll turn him into El Tigre, which gives him superpowers. And the whole show is about Manny deciding if he wants to use his powers for good, like his father White Pantera, or for evil, like his grandfather Puma Loco. Along with his best friend Frida, her and Manny have adventures in Miracle City, fighting off evil villains who ruin their fun. The show is fun. I really love the idea of Mexican superheroes, although some of the plots have been done before and can be cartoon cliches. However, the way the show tackles them can be different at times, and some of these plots are based on Jorge's childhood, so you can sense originality and not just them trying to be your average cartoon around this time. And also making these plots fun are the characters. And speaking of characters, we have White Pantera, Manny's dad. He's your typical father figure that tries to teach his son how to be a good hero like he is. But he's not your average boring parent that tries to help their kid. He can be a really fun and cartoony character. And although he does have a side of responsibility with raising Manny, he does also have a silly side that is enjoyable to watch. And then we have Frida, who is always by Manny's side, and she plays the best friend character. But Frida is such a fun character to watch, and her being the only normal person on the show is cool to see. Since we have so many superheroes and supervillains, it's cool to see a grounded character that actually has a personality. And then we have Puma Loco. Although he prefers to be a villain, he will help his family from danger and sometimes does some good things, but then ends up saving his bad reputation. So for these three characters we have here, they are fun and silly characters that are really likable. And although yeah, it might be a little annoying to have 3 out of the 4 main characters try to be the comedy relief, they all can have their serious moments and are always there for Manny when he needs them. And then lastly, we have El Tigre himself. This show has some parallels with Danny Phantom. Not only are they both Nicktoons that aired in 2000, but they both follow a teenager that has to deal with handling superpowers and fight off villains that threaten his town. The difference between these characters, however, are that we got to see Danny have his powers for the first time, and seeing him evolve from a rookie hero with no experience to this experienced cool ghost hero. But for Manny, he already has superpowers in the first episode, so we don't get any development between him and having to get used to superpowers. We do kind of get some development on him wanting to either be good or evil, but I feel like that would have been more effective if we saw Manny get his superpowers for the first time and seeing him having to get used to them. And Manny himself doesn't have much of a personality. He's a straight man, an everyday typical character having to deal with these superpowers, and that would have been fine and could have helped him grow as a character if we saw this typical kid having to deal with something not normal and the comparison of his everyday life and his superhero life. But since they don't focus on Manny not knowing how to use his powers, that pretty much kind of makes Manny a typical and weak main character. And as for the villains, they're alright. There's some that stand out for me, such as Sartana, but however the other ones such as Sergio, Black Cuervo, Dr. Chipotle Jr. and Sr., El Oso, and General Cabuza aren't really all that memorable, since pretty much every villain's backstory is pretty weak and vague, with them not standing out that much, which kind of makes them not really all that fun. Like, for example, the villains in the Powerpuff Girls are so memorable because they have their own debut episode all about themselves, so we get to know them a lot better. And they all have distinct personalities, and their designs are unique and clever and different from one another. But for these characters, they don't really have an episode focus on them. For the first episode, they get randomly introduced with a fourth backstory about their first time dealing with White Pantera and El Tigre. And none of these characters really get introduced on this show. They've all met El Tigre beforehand, so they don't really take that much time to get to know the characters, since Manny has already known them, so why does he need to be reintroduced to them? And although they do have some differences, such as like having a robot hand, being made of titanium, and being a zombie, but they do act similar, and a lot of them wear sombreros along with every single other side character. And speaking of sombreros, the Mexican inspiration definitely helps build character for the show. Besides Mucha Lucha, this is the only Mexican cartoon around this time, so it must have been something new for kids. I remember as a kid watching this show, and I thought it was cool to see how different the characters and the look of the show itself compared to like other shows around this time. However, sometimes the show can be too Mexican, and what I mean is that it can be too stereotypical, like having almost every single character wear a sombrero, bringing up churros a lot, and a few others. Things that, you know, typical people be like, oh, that's what Mexicans are, with it not really being true. However, the series creators are Mexican, and they did live in Tijuana, so maybe this is just how Mexican culture is, and they don't really mention other typical Mexican food like burrito and tacos and fajitas, so that's okay. But I don't think being very Mexican is a bad thing at all, and this does make the show more unique than other shows around this time and on the network, so it does let the show be creative. And what makes the show creative is the animation. I really love the style of Jorge Gutierrez. I love how simplistic the character designs are. I do love how Mexican everything looks. Even if I didn't know this was Mexican influence, I could really sense it in the animation. And also, this was the first ever Nickelodeon show to use Flash, and while I was watching it, I didn't notice that much of a difference. I think the animation still holds up, and although there are better looking Flash shows nowadays, such as Archer and Gumball, like the technology has advanced, but I do still think it does look good for the time it came out. And lastly, one thing in the show that bugged me was the sound effects. They overused quite a few, and it sounded weird to hear your average old cartoony sound effects like the running sound effect, and a few others, especially for this type of cartoon. And they did overuse the tiger sound effect. They had one tiger sound effect that they used for every single episode, and by the end it kinda got annoying. And they'd overuse others as well. And they used the same few for each episode, unlike, say, Anna and Eddie, that would have such a variety of sound effects that it wouldn't make a difference if we heard the same one a couple of times in an episode. However, this is just a nitpick, and would only be a slight problem if you marathon the show like I did. But all in all, I was impressed by El Tigre. I thought it had some great characters besides our main one, which made watching the show more fun, along with clever ideas for the show and a unique theme making this cartoon not like any other. Although I don't think it's one of the best Nicktoons or one of the best 2000s cartoons, since I did have some problems with it, like our main character being boring, a missed opportunity of making Manny a better character, some weak villains, a little too stereotypical, and overuse of sound effects. But however, I would still recommend this show for anyone who liked The Book of Life and wants to see more of Jorge Gutierrez's Mexican style, or just to see more Mexican influences in American cartoons. So, yeah, I'm the Disco Spider, and peace out.